Stand up. You who are able, stand. Please hurry. We don't have much time. As they were coming out of the temple, one of his disciples said, "Rabbi, look, what magnificent stones, what incredible buildings." He said, "Take a good look. Not one stone will be left on top of another. All this will be knocked down." When they were sitting on the Mount of Olives across from the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew were asking him, "Well, tell us when this will be. And what will be the sign that these things are about to happen?" And he said, "Watch out that you don't get led astray. Many will come in my name and say, 'I'm the one.' They will lead many people astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, don't be afraid. These are inevitable. The end is not yet. Nation will rise up against nation and empire against empire, and there will be earthquakes all around, and there will be famines. And that's just the beginning of the birthing. As for you, watch out for yourselves. You'll be handed over to councils and beaten up in public assemblies and made to stand before governors and kings because of me as a testimony against them. Because the good news has to be proclaimed to all people. So when they put you on trial, when they hand you over, don't worry beforehand about what you'll say. Whatever comes into your head in the moment, say that. Because it won't be you speaking. It'll be the Holy Spirit. Brother will betray brother to death, and a father his own child, and children will rise up and have parents put to death. And you will all be hated because of my name. The one who hangs in there till the end will be saved. When you see the desolating sacrilege being set up in a place where it should not be, let the reader understand that it's time for the people of Judea to head for the hills. And someone on a roof had better not go down for a coat, and someone in a field had better not go back into the house. And too bad for pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. Pray that it doesn't happen in winter. In those days there will be suffering like there has never been since the beginning of creation until now, or ever will be again. And if the Lord had not cut short those days, no one would survive. But because of the chosen, because of the elect, the Lord has cut short those days. So at that time, if anyone says, hey, look, here's the Messiah, or there he is, don't believe it. False messiahs and phony prophets will come along and produce signs and omens to lead astray, if they can, even the elect. So watch out and keep awake. And now I've told you all these things in advance. But in those days, after all that suffering, the sun will be darkened and the moon will withhold her light, and the stars in the heavens will be shaken. And then they'll see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory, and he will send out the angels to gather up the elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the edges of the sky. Sit down. Sit down, hurry, we don't have much time. Learn the lesson of the fig tree. You know, when its branch becomes tender and it sends out leaves, then you know that summer is near. So when you see these things happening, you'll know that it is near, right at the gates. Honestly, I'm telling you, this generation will not pass away until all of these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But as for the day or the hour, no one knows. Not the angels, not the Son, only the Father. So watch out and keep awake, because you don't know when the time will come. It's like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with work to do, and he instructs the doorkeeper to be on the lookout. So be on the lookout. Because you don't know when the master of the house will come, at evening or at midnight or at rooster crow or at dawn. Or else he might find you sleeping, or you when he comes suddenly. So what I say to you, I say to everyone. Keep awake. Keep awake. It was 2 days before the Passover, the festival of unleavened bread. The chief religious leaders were looking for a way to arrest him in secret and put him to death, but they said not during the festival. Might cause a riot. Well, he was at Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper. As they sat at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive ointment of nard. And she broke open the jar, poured the ointment over his head. Some who were sitting nearby were saying among themselves in anger, well, why has the ointment been wasted like that? This ointment could have been sold for 300 denarii, the money given to the poor. And they scolded her. And Jesus said, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She has done a good service for me. You will always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you please, but you won't always have me. She's done what she could. She has anointed my head beforehand for its burial. Honestly, I'm telling you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her. Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief religious leaders in order to betray him. And when they heard it, they were overjoyed. They offered to give him money. On the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, his disciples came to him and said, where do you want us to go to make preparations for you to eat the Passover? So he sent 2 of them and said, go into the city. And a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. And wherever he enters, say to the master of the house, the teacher asks, where is my guest room where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. So they set off. They found everything exactly as he had said. And they prepared the Passover meal. That evening, Jesus arrived with the 12. And when they had taken their places at the table and were eating, he was saying to them, you know, truth is, one of you will betray me. One who is sitting here at the table with me, and they all got into an uproar, and they were saying, well, it can't be me, can it? He said, it is. One of the 12. One who is dipping bread in a bowl with me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but damn the one by whom he is betrayed. It would be better for that one to have been unborn. While they were eating, he took a loaf of bread. Looking up, he blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. And he said, have some. It's my body. And then he took a cup. And after giving thanks, he gave it to them. And they all drank from it. And then he said, this cup is my blood of the covenant poured out for many. Honestly, I'm telling you, I will never again drink of the fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new in God's domain. After they had sung the hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. He was saying to them, you know, truth is, you will all become deserters. Just as it's written, I will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered, but after I'm raised, I will go before you into Galilee. Peter said, well, they might all desert you, but I won't. Jesus said, this day, this very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter said emphatically, no way. Even if I have to die with you, no way I'll ever deny you. They all said the same thing. He came to Gethsemane and he said to them, sit here while I pray. And he took Peter and James and John and he became distressed, agitated. He said, I'm dying of grief. Wait here and keep awake. And he went on a little further, and he threw himself to the ground. And he began to pray that the hour might pass from him. He said, Papa, Father, anything's possible for you. Take this cup away from me. Not what I want, what you want. He came back and found them sleeping. He says to Peter, Simon, are you asleep? You couldn't keep awake 1 hour. Keep awake so that you won't be put to the time of trial. Oh, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He went away again and prayed using the same words, and again he came back and found them sleeping. Their eyes were heavy. They didn't know what to say. A third time he came back and said, oh, so, still sleeping, huh? Catching up on your rest. Enough. The hour has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up. Let's go. Oh, look. My betrayer is here. And immediately while he was still speaking, Judas, who was one of the 12, arrived with a mob armed with swords and clubs. Now the betrayer had given them a sign. He said, "The one I kiss is your man. Arrest him and take him away under guard." So Judas goes over to Jesus and he says, "Rabbi." And he kissed him. And they took hold of him and arrested him, and someone standing nearby drew his sword and struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his ear. And then Jesus said, "You came all the way out here armed with swords and clubs to arrest me like I'm some common criminal? Every day I was with you in the temple teaching. Why didn't you arrest me then?" Well, let the scriptures be fulfilled. And they all deserted him and ran away. A certain young man was following him, wearing nothing but a linen cloth. They grabbed hold of him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. They took Jesus to the high priest's house, and the chief religious leaders and the whole council were assembled. Peter had followed at a distance right into the courtyard of the high priest and was sitting with the guards, warming himself by the fire. Well, the chief religious leaders were trying to find evidence against him to put him to death, but they couldn't find any. And many gave false testimonies, and their testimonies didn't agree. And some even gave this false testimony. They said, "Well, we heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple made with hands, and in 3 days build another not made with hands.'" But even on this point, their testimonies didn't agree. So the high priest stood up and said, "Well, you don't have an answer. What is it that they testify against you?" But he remained silent. So again the high priest spoke up and said, "Are you Messiah, Son of the Blessed One?" And Jesus said, "Yeah, and you will see the Son of Man coming in clouds of glory and seated at the right hand of power." And the high priest tore his vestments and said, "What more evidence do we need? You heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?" And they all declared that he was deserving of death. And they began to spit on him and to blindfold him and to strike him. And they were saying, "Prophesy, prophesy." And the guards also took him and beat him up. Meanwhile, out in the courtyard, one of the slave girls sees Peter warming himself, and she goes over to him and she stares at him and she says, "You were with that man Jesus of Nazareth." But he denied it. He said, "I don't have the slightest idea what you're talking about." And he got up and went out into the forecourt. And a rooster crowed. A little while later, the slave girl comes around again, and she sees him, and she comes over, and she says to some people sitting nearby, she says, "Psst, this man is one of them." But he denied it. A little while later, some of the people sitting nearby said, yeah, you are one of them. You're a Galilean." And Peter started cursing and swearing. He said, "I don't know this man you're talking about." And just then, the rooster crowed a second time. And Peter remembered what Jesus had said, that before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down and cried and cried. First thing in the morning, the chief religious leaders and the council held a consultation. And they bound Jesus, and they led him out, and they handed him over to Pilate. Pilate said, "You are king of the Judeans?" Jesus said, "If you say so." Then the chief religious leaders brought out their long list of accusations. Pilate said, "Well, you don't have an answer? Look at the charges they're bringing against you." But he remained silent, made no further reply. Pilate was puzzled. Now, every year at the festival, he used to release for anyone they asked for. So now there was a man named Barabbas who was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. The crowd came together and began to demand that Pilate honor his custom. And so Pilate said, "Would you like me to release for you the king of the Judeans?" Pilate figured it was out of jealousy that some of the religious leaders had handed him over, but meanwhile those religious leaders were out stirring up the crowd, trying to get him to release Barabbas instead. So again Pilate spoke up and said, "Well then, what do you want me to do with the one you call king of the Judeans?" And they shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate said, "Why? He hasn't done anything wrong." But they shouted back even more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wanting to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and after flogging Jesus, handed him over to be crucified. Then the guards took him to the governor's residence, and they dressed him in a purple cloak, and they twisted thorns into a crown and put it on him, and they began to salute him. They said, "Hail, King of the Judeans." And they struck him, and they spit on him, and they knelt down in mock homage. And after they were finished mocking him, they stripped him of the purple cloak, put his own clothes back on him, and led him out to be crucified. They compelled a passerby who was just coming in from the country. It was Simon of Cyrene, father of Alexander and Rufus, you know. They led him to a place called Golgotha, place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he wouldn't take it. And they crucified him. And they divided up his clothes, cast lots. Who would get what? It was 9 o'clock in the morning when they crucified him. And the inscription of the charges read, "King of the Judeans." And they crucified 2 criminals with him, one on his right, one on his left. Right, left, right, left, right, left. People were walking by, were making fun of him. They said, "Ha ha, you who would destroy the temple and build another in 3 days? Save yourself. Come on down from that cross there." And some of the religious leaders were mocking him too. Among themselves, they said, well, now, he saved others, but he can't save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down now so we can see and believe. Those who were crucified with him were taunting him too. At noon, darkness spread over the whole land until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And at 3 o'clock, he cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you abandoned me? And some people standing nearby said, hey, listen, he's calling for Elijah. Someone went and got a sponge and soaked it in sour wine and put it on the end of a pole and offered it up to him. And they said, wait, let's see if Elijah will come and rescue him. But just then, he gave out a loud cry. Breathed his last. And the curtain in the temple was torn in two, top to bottom. And the centurion who saw how Jesus died said, this really was the Son of God. There were women watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James the Younger, and Joseph and Salome. These women used to follow him too. They used to provide for him while he was in Galilee. And there were many other women who followed him up to Jerusalem. When evening came, because it was the day of preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, who was himself a respected member of the council and who was waiting expectantly for God's domain, went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Well, now, Pilate had been wondering if Jesus was dead. So, summoning the centurion, he inquired as to whether Jesus was already dead. And when the centurion confirmed that Jesus was dead, Pilate granted Joseph the body. And Joseph went and bought a linen cloth and took down the body and wrapped it in a linen cloth, laid it in a tomb, carved out of the rock. And he pushed a stone against the entrance to the tomb. And Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where the body was laid. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They had been saying to each other, well, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance to the tomb? But when they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had already been rolled back. When they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe, sitting on the right side. They were alarmed. The young man said, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified. He has been raised. He's not here. Look, there's the place they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you." So they went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anybody. They were afraid because